Hey, it's Lynn Oz, January the 5th, 2014. And I'm going to talk to you about Mount Hermon, which is the gate of the fallen angels. And we're going to talk about it in association with the Illuminati, the New World Order, the United Nations, the Nephilim, and the fallen angels. Satan and the Antichrist. They all go together. And I'm going to supply some videos by BP Earth, and one that just also shows you an aerial view of Mount Hermon, and it'll show you the UN base that they have there, and one by Rob Skiba that talks about it a little bit more as well. Very interesting stuff. And the Antichrist will come from Mount Hermon. You'll understand that more here shortly. First of all, I told you that they're at the highest point of Mount Hermon, which right here you can see Mount Hermon, the American Heritage Dictionary. Hermon, that's how it's pronounced, or Hermon. The highest peak, 2,815.8, that's 9,232 feet, of the anti-Lebanon range on the Syria-Lebanon border. It was sacred to the worshippers of Baal and is considered the traditional site of Jesus' transfiguration. And you'll also find out here in a little bit too, something very significant that Jesus did, where he actually stood there with his disciples right there in Satan's territory and proclaimed who he was on Satan's little ground. So that was very significant as well. Now, first off, according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, Hermon means forbidden place. Jerome, a 4th century translator of the Latin Vulgate Bible, interpreted Hermon as anathema. Mount Hermon was the port of entry for a group of wicked angels who corrupted the human race in the days of Noah. Moses wrote, "The sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose." There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Genesis 6, 1-4. Now, he goes on to talk about something that some rabbis mentioned about this. He says, "I want to add some things that you may not have heard before. For example, there is a rabbinical remark about this story in an ancient Jewish commentary in which two rabbis add the following insight." And it's kind of interesting. It says, Rabbi Josie says, following a tradition, that these Nephilim were Uzzah and Azazel, whom God deprived of their supernatural sanctity. How, it may be asked, can they exist in this world? Rabbi Haya answers that they were of a class of spirits referred to in the words, "and birds which fly on the earth," Genesis 1:20. And these, as we have said, appear to men in the form of human beings. It is asked, how can they transform themselves? The answer is that they do in fact transform themselves into all kinds of shapes, because when they come down from heaven, they become as concrete as air and take human shape. These are Uzzah and Azazel, who rebelled in heaven and were cast down by God and became corporeal on the earth and remained on it, not being able to divest themselves of their earthly form. Now, note that the rabbi alluded to a class of spirits described as birds in Genesis 1:20. Perhaps this was the origin of the story that angels had bird-like wings. To this day, white doves are symbolic of good, while black crows are typical of evil. It should also be noted that birds seem to have a reptilian connection. The phoenix was depicted as an eagle in the west, but in the east, it was a winged dragon. From ancient lore, Satan was thought to be somewhat of a gargoyle with bat-like wings. The apocryphal Book of Enoch enlarges upon the story of the Nephilim. Now, he goes into the background of the Book of Enoch, and I will supply the link to this article so you can look. I won't read everything, but I'm going to read quite a bit here, so bear with me. And he supplies verses like, "And it came to pass after the children of men had increased in those days, beautiful and comely daughters were born to them." Now, the author of this article does not advise that the book of Enoch is Holy Spirit inspired or anything like that. However, it is history and regarded as a history. Okay? There are books of history outside of the Bible. It's no different than when you went to school and you learned about the history for whatever country you live in. Well, that's not in the Bible. Nonetheless, it is true recorded history. Okay, that's what this is. So it has some more verses. Now it has a verse from Genesis and so forth. Canaan settled in the area of Mount Hermon and southward into the territory that was to become Abraham's promised land. This is why the promised land was called Canaan in the days of Moses and Joshua. Mizraim continued to move southward into Egypt. Coincidentally, Mount Hermon has 3 peaks. Now listen to this. And Ham's family encountered another set of 3 peaks that had been built before the flood, those being 3 great pyramids. Evidently, Mizraim was fascinated by the pyramids and developed a system of worship based on those ancient structures. Cush and Phut continued the family migration southward and settled in Ethiopia and parts of southern Africa. To this day, Mount Hermon is still the place where evil continually rains down upon Israel. It is the area of the Syrians and Hezbollah. The book of Enoch continues. And they took unto themselves wives, and each chose for himself one. And they began to go into them, and mixed with them, and taught them charms and conjurations, and made them acquainted with the cutting of roots of woods. And they became pregnant, and brought forth great giants, whose stature was 3,000 ells. These devoured all the acquisitions of mankind, till men were unable to sustain themselves. And the giants turned themselves against mankind, in order to devour them. And that is Enoch 7:1-4. It seems that these fallen angels, or the Nephilim, contaminated almost all of life on earth. We do not know how many people were contaminated, but we are told that at least Noah's family remained genetically pure. For that reason, God destroyed the world with a flood. Had it not been for Noah and his 3 sons, those fallen angels might have brought an end to all life on the planet. Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth helped save the animals and repopulate the earth. Now it talks about how God judged the angels, and it gives us some scriptures from the New Testament. Let's take a look at them. It says 2 Peter 2:4-5. Both Peter and Jude added further insight about these fallen angels. Peter said, God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment, and spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the 8th person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly. 2 Peter 2:4-5. Jude 6. The angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. Both passages tell of severe punishment upon the Nephilim. Yet Moses said that sons of God reappeared after the flood, Genesis 6:4. So Moses said that sons of God reappeared after the flood. How can this be? Well, the book of Enoch only mentioned 200 angels, and Satan was not among them. Bear in mind, Satan's forces were much larger than a mere 200. Perhaps the original group of Nephilim were scouts for a much larger force of demonic angels who, under the leadership of Satan, came to earth after the flood. It seems to me that the Tower of Babel, meaning gate to God, may have been built in an effort to contact these dark forces and forge a defense against the threat of another judgment. As noted in the Zohar above, Rabbi Haya said, to this day they exist and teach men the arts of magic. So these demonic entities exist today, and I'm sure they can manifest themselves in different forms. They could probably appear to us as people. You know, the Bible says that it says we never know when we may be entertaining angels unaware. Well, certainly if we were unaware, that would mean they would appear to humans as us. I mean, humans to us, excuse me. So if they appeared to humans, to us, we wouldn't know they were angels. So if an angel can appear as a human, so could a dark angel. So they are here. They are walking among us. They can be in human form. They could be invisible to our eyes as well and be operating in the background in our thoughts and in things that happen, just all sorts of ways. As noted above, Genesis 6:4 adds, and after that, meaning that more Nephilim returned to this area after the flood and established what Joshua called the land of giants. Moses and Joshua conquered those giants of whom Og was king. Moses wrote that Og's bed was almost 15 feet long, and that's in Deuteronomy 3:11 through 13. Og reigned in Mount Hermon. Joshua wrote, and the coast of Og, king of Bashan, which was the remnant of the giants that dwelt at Ashtaroth and at Edrei, and reigned in Mount Hermon and in Salcah and in all Bashan unto the border of the Geshurites and the Maccathites and half Gilead, the border of Sihon, king of Heshbon. Them did Moses, the servant of the Lord, and the children of Israel smite. Joshua 12:4 through 6. Now that reminds me of something here. I remember when I was reading the Old Testament, I thought God was so mean because he had his people go in and slay children and women and, take none of this and take none of that and kill everybody. I'm thinking, what did the children do? Why did he have them kill the children? Well, that's because they weren't people. They were Nephilim. They were Anakim and Nephilim. They were evil. They weren't like the kind of children you're thinking of. So now that all makes sense because I didn't understand that before. It says the tribe of Dan moved to this area during the days of Judges and adopted the Canaanite worship of these angels. It was an ancient idolatry that opposed the worship of Jehovah. In fact, Baal and Ashtaroth were Canaanite deities whose origin was Mount Hermon. The book of Judges even calls Mount Hermon Baal Hermon, saying Judges 3:3, namely 5 lords of the Philistines and all the Canaanites and the Sidonians and the Hivites that dwelt in Mount Lebanon from Mount Baal Hermon unto the entering in of Hamath. Now, there we have right there. I'm trying to show you really how evil and Mount Hermon is and the significance here, so that when you look at how the United Nations has carefully put one of their biggest facilities at the very peak, right where the fallen angels fell, then you would understand that just shows you more what everybody's trying to tell you, that the United Nations or the Illuminati, the New World Order, the Nephilim, the Anakim, the fallen angels, the whole 9 yards, okay? Now, furthermore, the fallen angels living on and around Mount Hermon adopted a biblical name for the mountain. They had the audacity to plagiarize a name that God had given to Mount Moriah, Mount Sion. Moses wrote, and they possessed Sihon's land and the land of Og, king of Bashan, 2 kings of the Amorites, which were on this side Jordan, toward the sun rising. From Aror, which is by the bank of the river Arnon, even unto Mount Sion, which is Hermon. Deuteronomy 4:47 and 48. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing some of these names properly. I'm really bad about that, so please forgive me. But it says Sion means lofty, whereas Zion means stronghold. It is evident that Satan was pushing for a counterfeit of God's plan for man's redemption. The devil was determined to replace the seed of the woman with the seed of the serpent. In a book titled The Gods of the Lodge, Arthur Reginald C. Hout Jr. described what he found during his trip to Mount Hermon. In the excavations of Baalbek, renamed Heliopolis by the Greeks, temples were uncovered honoring Baal and Bacchus. The same is true of the site at Sidon. The temple there is named the Temple of Baal of Sidon, but by far of greater importance was the Temple of Baal found on Mount Hermon. Perhaps it would be more meaningful to you if I, Reginald Hout, quote direct from my source. In the 1982 edition of the Thompson Chain Reference Bible, 4th Improved Edition, the archaeological supplement was provided by G. Frederick Owen. Owen wrote on page 376, of his supplement the following: Mount Hermon, the chief of the mountains of Palestine, is 5 miles wide and 20 miles long. It has 3 peaks, the tallest of which is 9,166 feet above the Mediterranean Sea. For centuries before Abraham's time, the mountain had been venerated in connection with Baal. Baal worship was the leading religion of Canaan. On most of the high peaks of the country were shrines known as high places. The higher, the holier. Here groves were planted and shrines erected for worship. Since Mount Hermon towered above all the other mountains in the region, it was the chief high place, the shrine of shrines. Canaanites looked to Mount Hermon much as the Muslims face Mecca when they pray. And it goes into more detail on that. You can see on the article. Now, this is what I want to get to right here. This is mind-blowing. This is amazing in a good way. It says, during the ministry of Jesus, he and his disciples visited Caesarea Philippi. And there's a photo below. I'll scroll down a minute and show you the photo better. And BP Earth has this in one of his videos I'm going to post. It says, during the ministry of Jesus, he and his disciples visited Caesarea Philippi, where the Jordan River springs forth from the slopes of Mount Hermon. In the photo, one can see the grotto and cave where Baal worship was in full swing. While observing these shrines, Jesus posed the question, whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? Matthew 16:13. Jesus was standing in the territory of his great enemy, Satan, and his idolatrous Nephilim. It was the area out of which the Antichrist would arise. Now you can see right here, this is an artist rendition of the archaeological site. It says, artist conception of Caesarea Philippi, also called Panias, during the Roman period. The pagan religious site was built into the cliff face with temples dedicated to Baal and many other deities. The site shown below as it appears today. Okay, so you know they did a lot of evil things, including sacrificing their own children and everything. Now here's how it looks today. Now look, compare here. You can see that this big opening you're going to see when I scroll down is where this building here is. Then you'll see a little doorway to the right. That's this here. Okay, so see the big opening? That's where a building was. Alright, and then they had something it looks like built like stairs above where the water was, or maybe it wasn't there then, I don't know. And then right here is the smaller doorway. Alright, now it goes on to talk about the French. I'm only going to read one part here because it has to do with the number 33. We know that 33 is the Freemason Illuminati number, 33-degree Freemason. Okay, it says in 1666, Louis the 14th of France authorized the building of an observatory in Paris to measure longitude. This was the beginning of the Paris Zero Meridian. Believe it or not, according to the Paris Zero Meridian, Mount Hermon in the ancient history of Dan is located at, guess what, no surprise, 33 degrees east of the Paris Zero Meridian longitude and 33 degrees north of the equator latitude. The 33 degree became an important part of Freemasonry, probably due to a history that dates back to the Knights Templar, the French Merovingian dynasty. I'm sorry, I do not know how to pronounce that. If you do, that's awesome. And their family ties to the Danites. See our chapter on Dan and Guardians of the Grail. Now I want to go back up because this part I kind of skipped over because I got hung up. I forgot, and I got hung up explaining the pictures to you. But I was talking about what Jesus did, okay? And he was standing right there on Satan's domain, asking his disciples, who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? Jesus was standing in the territory of his great enemy Satan, and his idolatrous Nephilim is the area out of which the Antichrist would arise. I want to pay special attention to that. That's what's so awesome. Jesus, knowing exactly where they were standing, made that proclamation, or had them make the proclamation of who he was, right there on enemy territory. That is very significant, and it just so happens that that area is where the Antichrist would arise. So that means that, as I told you, the United Nations has a major facility right there in that exact spot. The Antichrist is going to come through the Illuminati, through the United Nations, through the New World Order, because they're all the same. Okay, that's very significant. Now let's go down here to the tribe of Dan. Okay, this goes back to the Old Testament again. Jacob prophesied that Dan would be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path. And Moses prophesied, Dan is a lion's whelp. He shall leap from Bashan. Deuteronomy 33:22. These two prophecies are remarkable in that they connect Dan with the seed of the serpent from which the Antichrist will emerge to claim the title Lion of Judah. And this is the days we're living in. We are the generation that are going to see the seed of the serpent from which the Antichrist will emerge to claim the title Lion of Judah. We are going to see that very, very soon. In the book of Judges, the Danites relocated to the northern reaches of the Promised Land. They settled at the foot of Mount Hermon in the territory of Bashan and adopted the idolatrous Canaanite religion of Baal and Ashtaroth. Eventually, they left for parts unknown and became the proverbial lost tribe. However, the Danaans, or Spartans of the Greece, established the same religious practices that the Danites had developed on Mount Hermon. Greek mythology is an elaborate reinvention of the Danite religion. The Spartans invented a messenger of the gods and called him Hermes, a variation of Hermon, go figure, whom the Romans called Mercury. Supposedly Hermes had a son named Pan. The name Pan could be a corruption of the name Dan. Today, the Arabs call Caesarea Philippi Banias, but that is because there is no P sound in Arabic. The older form was Panias, meaning city of Pan, from Panion. The name comes from Pan, the pagan god who was worshipped there. Niches for Pan statues can still be seen. Observe the niches and cave grotto in the photo. In 4 BC, this area became the tetrarchy of Herod's son Philippus, who renamed Panias as Caesarea Philippi. This name continued until the reign of Nero. Now, the name Pan means all things, all gods, or all life. Therefore, when the Romans built a domed temple to commemorate all their gods, they named it the Pantheon. It is a combination of two root words, Pan, standing for the son of Hermes or Mercury, and Theo, meaning gods. It is clear that Mount Hermon, with its infamous fallen angels, found its way into the mythologies of many ancient cultures. Solomon even mentions Mount Hermon. In the Song of Solomon, he mentions it, and you can read that there on the article that I'll provide the link to. There's more. A verse from Judges, and they called the name of the city Dan after the name of Dan their father, who was born unto Israel. Howbeit the name of the city was Laish at the first. Solomon mentions Mount Hermon in connection with leopards. It is said that Ham's grandson Nimrod wore a leopard skin, etc., etc. It goes into detail there. Now, back to the rabbis. It says, Rabbi Simeon said, our colleagues are acquainted with a profound mystery concerning these garments. In Daniel 7 and Revelation 13, the Antichrist seems to be connected to the metaphoric leopard. So that's very significant and interesting. He does bring up that we can't say with certainty that Adam and Eve wore leopard skins, but there are a number of sources that suggest Nimrod wore a leopard skin. Among them was Alexander Hislop in his work, The Two Babylons. It says their custom of taming the leopard and pressing it into the service of man in this way is traced up to the earliest times of primitive antiquity. It goes on to some more detail about that. Now, here's the good part, and this is the last amount of this article. The Danite Antichrist. In other articles, we have covered the teaching of the early church theologians Irenaeus and Hippolytus, who said that the Antichrist would come from the tribe of Dan, based upon Jeremiah 8:16. The snorting of his horses was heard from Dan. The whole land trembled at the sound of the neighing of his strong ones. We discussed the fact that the Greek king Alexander the Great claimed to be born of the seed of the serpent, and we have discussed the possibility that the Roman Emperor Nero could have descended from the Danites. When Nero ruled the Roman Empire, he renamed Caesarea Philippi in honor of himself. For a while, the site of the ancient Danite city was called Neronius, meaning city of Nero. Finally, an ancient Jewish midrash likened Samson to their expected Messiah, saying Samson in some respects was considered a forerunner of the Messiah who will come from Judah, but his mother, according to the midrash, will be of the tribe of Dan. Amazing. The Jews are looking for a Messiah whose father is from the royal family of Judah, but whose mother will be from the tribe of Dan. Those fallen angels who descended to Mount Hermon introduced the seed of the serpent into the human race. Evidently, after the flood, they consorted with members of the tribe of Dan, mixing the seed of the serpent into the human genome once again. The first time it happened, God judged the world with water. The next time it will be by fire. And will that fire happen as a result of heavenly bodies being thrown at the earth? What will happen? It's all very interesting. And like I said, the United Nations has a major facility sitting right there at the very top of Mount Hermon, their home, because they are the blood of the Nephilim. They are the serpent seed. So it's all right there for you. What are the odds that they just happen to put a facility right there on Satan's high holy ground, so to speak, where the fallen angels came crashing down, and all sorts of spiritual significance? And we are in the end times, and I wholeheartedly believe that we are going to see the rise of the Antichrist very, very, very soon, and he will be coming through the serpent seed, which means somehow the United Nations, the New World Order, the Illuminati, the elitists, the Freemasons, the Nephilim, the Anakim, all that good stuff, he will be coming through them. Who will he be? None of us knows for sure. We can project that it's Obama or whatever, okay? But we will not know for sure who it is until some other things happen. Very interesting days. Let's keep our eyes open and keep in mind all the things prophetically that the Bible has predicted as we watch the news unfold before our eyes. Thank you, and God bless you.